need a bigger boat.
I fart in your general direction.
You talking to me?
We're going to talk about iconic props from the 1970s.
It is the best decade of filmmaking in the history of cinema.
The birth of the blockbuster.
The birth of New Hollywood.
Yeah.
Poppy knows exactly what we're talking about.
Have you seen any movies from the 1970s?
I have. I've seen maybe 3 or 4.
I'm Scott Prop and Roll, and welcome back to Prop Guys React. We got Mark, Poppy, and Matt in the back. And today we're going to talk about iconic props from the 1970s.
You know, the 70s. It was the decade before the 80s. Most of you guys weren't alive probably, but believe me, there's some good stuff to take a look at.
First blockbuster.
Was it Jaws or was it Star Wars? What do you think?
Jaws really was considered the first blockbuster, although The Godfather kind of started it.
And they call it a blockbuster because people were lined up around the block.
I have seen Jaws.
If you hadn't,
And Star Wars.
I would have walked
The
out.
Godfather.
Okay, the first one's pretty obvious. I'm going for the lightsaber in Star Wars.
That's the easy one.
Yeah, that's probably the most iconic prop of the 70s.
Maybe of all time.
It's a laser sword, right? Lucas came up with this idea, but then they had to make it real, so.
And you know what it is? It's a Graflex flash handle off one of the old antique Graflex cameras. It's actually a Graflex Model 3 flash handle. It plugged onto the side of a Graflex camera.
So they basically removed the flash. That would be where the saber actually extends from.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that would have been a flash bulb.
The story was that either the prop guy or production designer found this, like he was just looking at a camera rental place.
The set decorator.
He's thinking that there might be something camera related that could work for this handle he's looking for.
And he pointed me to some boxes under a shelf. I pulled it out, and there were the Graflex handles. I don't even have to do anything to this.
And there's like 4 of these things, and they're just like perfect.
Yeah. Not a whole lot of modification.
And you know what I don't know is if they just treated it like a fencing sword.
There's like a dowel. Whenever you watch it, when they do it, there's like a little, you see a stutter, almost like a stop motion cut. And I think what it was is they literally either attached the dowel or did a cowboy switch.
The effect of the lightsaber was a rotating pole that had movie screen material applied to it so that it would reflect its light source back at many times the intensity.
And then they went back in, I think frame by frame, and added
Yeah, it's
the
tedious.
light. But that's something to dig into. I'm sure we'll get a lot of comments about it. So we have Marathon Man, a classic thriller from the 70s with Dustin Hoffman, Laurence Olivier, Roy Scheider, directed by John Schlesinger. So the iconic prop is the dental drill that Sir Laurence Olivier uses to torture Dustin Hoffman. That's the most remembered scene of the movie. He's torturing him with dental tools. So you can imagine how awful that would be. Some people walked out because it was so affecting. Conrad Hall, who's the director of photography, one of the best DPs ever, he wanted to see a little contrast in the cord because the cord was black. They added a cord that was white. You see him plug it in, and then there's a close-up of the drill going in, and you see this white cord coming out of the back. If it was black,
The cord just disappears.
Right.
exactly.
It's funny that you see something, though, that is being subbed out for something white.
Most of the time, DPs don't want anything white because it's too reflective, it's too bright, it calls your attention. But Schlesinger knew how he was going to shoot it. He knew he was going to do a close-up of the drill going into the guy's mouth, but then cut away and let the audience kind of, you know, imagine.
It's told in like sound.
Yeah. Somebody wanted Schlesinger to shoot a close-up of it actually touching the tooth. So they shot it, and apparently special effects worked on making a little puff of smoke when the drill hit a tooth, but they didn't use it because it's more effective without it. But
He looks like he knows what he's doing.
He knows the drill.
you guys, that's a real mouthful.
Hold!
So this is Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Yes.
It's one of my favorite movies growing up.
Me too.
I have seen it. King Arthur and Patsy. They use coconuts to mimic the horse hoof sound as they're running. This is how the movie opens. The smoke clears, a castle, and then over the hill comes King Arthur and Patsy, and he's got the coconuts, and this was the first bit that they discussed for the movie. That it's funnier if they don't have horses, even though the budget didn't really allow for it anyways.
Ridden on a horse? Yes. You're using coconuts. What? You've got 2 empty halves of coconut and you're banging them together.
The iconic prop is so front and center.
Yeah.
You can't think about the Holy Grail and not think about
Exactly.
the coconuts.
And you buy it. The whole rest of the movie, like you don't even
Yeah.
think about it.
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, would Foley artists use coconuts to replicate
I
horses?
mean,
running?
I don't know.
Maybe a Foley artist will join in on the comments and tell us, what would you use for a horse hoof?
That's more of how they would sound on pavement.
on a hard surface.
with horseshoes.
Right.
Not so much out in a.
A grassy landscape.
I bet they did it for radio broadcasts. It's a Western, and you'd hear the clippity clop. They got that from somewhere.
A 5-ounce bird can't carry a 1 pound coconut.
It's funny because it's so ridiculous they're trying to throw the logic at you. And the logic's not about the horses, it's about the coconut.
Are you suggesting coconuts migrate? Not at all.
A good runner-up for the coconut shells would be the rabbit. That's pretty good too.
Yeah.
That runs.
Do you remember? It gets built up by the guy they run into. He's like, "There's a huge monster," and they get up there, and it's this rabbit, and the guy goes to kill the rabbit, and it flies up and like bites his head off, and Arthur's like, "Jesus Christ!"
Jesus Christ!
If anyone watching hasn't seen Monty Python's Holy Grail, do yourself a favor, watch it. All right, so we have a iconic horror cult classic, Phantasm. And there are these chrome spheres that fly through this mortuary and kill people. They're kind of the weapons of the bad guy. So here it comes. And so the kid bites him. You see the knives come out of this sphere. It's pretty graphic. And there you go. Oh, gosh. Oh, see, look at that.
How did they sell this to the distributor? They die with balls to the face?
Pardon me. So Don Coscarelli, he directed it, and the sphere idea came from a dream. He was like running down a hallway, and he was being chased by this chrome sphere. Although it did not have any weapons on it. That was added when they discussed it for the movie. This was made by a special effects prop maker in LA named Willard Green. The way they shot it, which is the classic low budget way, is they shot it backwards.
I was gonna say.
Or they shot it and then played it.
That shot?
So this is the backwards. See, so basically what it is they literally just threw the ball like they were pitching the ball. And then, so it starts on a high trajectory and then it would go down. And then they reverse it, so a lot of the shots, the ball comes in low and then it goes up. And so, you know, real kind of rudimentary stuff. I know that when they first shot it, they had a lot of trouble, but then they realized they couldn't light the ball itself. They had to light everything around it, so they had to light the walls. They had built like a little wall that would go in front of the camera with a little round hole in it, so that...
So you don't see the camera?
Yeah.
It doesn't look that scary. He's having a ball.
He's having a ball. Wow, you're really good at playing that, Scott.
All right, well, I'm not actually playing it because I got Poppy right here. And that's exactly how they did the banjo scene in Deliverance, dueling banjos. All right, so in this scene, you have Ronnie Cox grabs his guitar, and a local kid has the banjo. They're playing dueling banjos together. Problem is, the kid that they liked that had the perfect look could not play the banjo. So they had an experienced banjo player hidden behind. They had sleeves cut in a shirt, and somebody hid behind, and because look, those are kind of man hands for as young as the kid is. They had an experienced banjo player doing it for most of it.
The only time you see it is either over the shoulder or this really low angle where you can't tell
Yeah, because
Yeah.
there it's actually the kid, but when you get for those tight close-ups, you can almost see the hands.
Well, I
look
think
different.
he's strumming, but I think the other hand is not.
Yeah.
It's the guy.
Oh yeah,
Because it's almost like you could learn that, you know?
yeah, yeah. Especially when you get into the fast portion at the end.
Yeah.
What's interesting is they kept it a secret, so the guy that actually performed it didn't get any credit for it. For years and years, he had signed a non-disclosure agreement and couldn't say anything. I don't know what the statute of limitations was, but finally he ended up saying, that was me. And other people corroborated the story, so.
So here we have Alien. This scene is with the eggs. Roger Christian, the art director, talked about they had a few that were practical, and they would open up, but they had a lot that were for background. But they would open up on the inside, and they used a sheep's stomach for the top portion.
So the membrane is a sheep's stomach?
Yes, yeah.
Well, that's
Remember,
gross.
You forget how good it is.
Yeah.
Because it's got like the translucent, you see the face hugger on the inside moving around.
Ridley Scott actually put like a rubber glove on, and he's the one who manipulated Alien when it flies out. So he would put his hand underneath and throw out the octopus-looking thing.
Ooh. Uh-oh.
Yeah, that.
Don't do it.
That's
There's
a
this.
sheep's stomach.
Yeah, because look at it. It's so
Yeah.
gross. Oh, God.
And the effects.
Oh, no!
For 1979, the visual effects in this were better than anybody had seen. But what's really funny is the trailer for this was done with a store-bought chicken egg and a platter of brownies. And that's all it is. If you look at it, it's just the camera moving over a baking pan full of brownies up to an egg.
Ridley Scott, he was an art director prior to this, so he was really always he still is extremely involved in the production design. It's hard to beat the original Alien.
I don't know.
It's just so good.
Personally, I like Aliens better.
So this is from arguably the best movie of the 70s, if not the best movie ever, which is The Godfather. Has lots of iconic props in it. This might be one of the most memorable, and it is the horse head. The movie producer has fired Johnny Fontaine. This is the threat. Basically, if you don't put Johnny Fontaine back in the movie, this is what's going to happen to you. Uh-oh.
Oh.
Okay, so
Story.
we apologize for the animal lovers out there, but this is a classic scene. The production was provided with a horse head. So it was this old horse head that was not realistic. It was like made of leather. It was like splitting. So as soon as Coppola saw it, apparently he was like, that's not gonna happen. So they literally found a horse that was, I read that they said it had emphysema. So it was a real horse head that they had. And they transported it in this very large metal box. And this actor was a very challenging guy to work with. So I think there was a part of these guys, they were kind of excited to do this to him. So he wasn't aware of what was gonna happen. And there's this horse head that's on dry ice. And he was not excited. And they put it in a bed, and it's all fake blood. But he had his legs pulled up because he didn't want to touch it, and Coppola apparently kept telling him, you got to straighten out, because they were messing with him. Mm-hmm. And after they shot the thing, the actor stormed off and kind of was throwing stuff. And I don't know if he had more to do that day, but he left for the day and they didn't see him again.
He was not happy about it at all.
Yeah.
Andy Graham.
All right, so I pick the Narragansett beer can from Jaws. I'm sure not everyone thinks of this as an iconic prop, but I do. The whole East Coast would think so as well, because this is a very popular beer on the East Coast. So much so that years later they made a commemorative Quint beer can. It looked just like this, and it says 1975, and it says Quint's beer. But if we're going to say this is iconic, you might want to say the styrofoam cup is iconic as well.
Yeah.
What I will say is cans up until like the early 70s were steel. However, this and what Quint has, it's not steel, it's aluminum. But I think they were just doing aluminum East Coast. So when most of the country saw this, they were like, wow, how does he crush that can? Because they weren't introduced to aluminum cans till more, I guess, past 1975. But there were a few companies like Narragansett where they had aluminum factories that were starting to switch their equipment over to make aluminum cans.
Based on everything I know about this movie and behind the scenes, I could almost guarantee that Robert Shaw was drinking a real beer there. In fact, the classic,
The speech.
the speech.
In the boat.
If you really pay attention, his demeanor kind of changes. You know the thing about a shark-sized chief? It's got lifeless eyes, black eyes like a doll's eyes.
You know the thing about a shark, he's got lifeless eyes, black eyes like a doll's eyes.
All right, so here we've got Game of Death, Bruce Lee, and he's got nunchucks.
Yes.
Popularized maybe because of this movie? But anyways, very iconic. The story goes that he couldn't appreciate the nunchuck at the time. The other actor here, Dan Inosanto, I believe is his name, he actually introduced Bruce Lee to the nunchucks. Apparently he mastered them in about 3 months, which is impressive in and of itself.
Yeah.
But apparently Bruce Lee had his own take on this. He designed his nunchucks for this movie to match his jumpsuit. They had multiple versions of what they made. They had like a balsa wood. I'm sure they had some rubbers as well. And but it's cool. He put his own spin onto these and really was hands-on in helping design it for this. Yeah, pretty iconic look.
And of course, this was the inspiration for the bride's outfit in Kill Bill. Where Tarantino used the yellow jumpsuit with the black stripe. This might have been Bruce Lee's last movie. Is this the movie he died on?
You're right. I think they might have finished it with doubles.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he died when they were still shooting.
Yeah.
They're all gonna laugh at you.
Carrie, it's the bucket of blood. It's hard to think about this movie and not think about this scene,
So what our iconic prop is the bucket of blood.
which is supposed to be pig's blood. Yeah.
There's a whole sequence of following the string up to the rafters, up to the cross beam, and onto the bucket.
It's really good De Palma. This entire sequence is done in slow motion.
Now, our audience doesn't know this, but Sissy Spacek is your aunt.
Yes.
So my question is, how old were you when you saw this for the first time?
I was a toddler when it came out. You know, I don't think I saw it until I was probably in my maybe early teens, I don't know.
So they purposely didn't let you see it, but you knew your Aunt Sissy was in a horror movie.
Growing up, I would go to my grandparents' house, her parents, and the room that my brother and I would sleep in at my grandparents' house was her old room. And they had decorated it with posters of her movies. There was a Carrie poster. The one where it's like the split where she's like clean and then bloody. That was an image in my head for years. So it's Karo syrup, red food dye. You know, I did some research because I knew stories from growing up, but it's actually my uncle who's pouring it on her head. Because my uncle is the production designer of this movie, or he actually was the art director. They didn't really use that term much.
The pig's blood was actually Karo syrup in food coloring. And the great thing about Karo syrup is it didn't smell.
Because they had met on a movie, Badlands. He did that as the production designer. He also did Phantom of the Paradise, which was De Palma's film before this. But literally, he was just on a ladder with a bucket, and it was action, dump. And I think they did 2 takes total. You know, the lights, and there's also some fire that happens. She like sets the room on fire. And so that Karo syrup was just kind of like baking onto her. And, you know, she had to be covered in that stuff for 2 days, I think.
Probably had to put on the same bloody dress.
Yeah.
Have you ever gotten a personal account from her on?
I mean, I just remember hearing Karo syrup all the time
Yeah.
growing up. You know, we would be eating pancakes with Karo syrup, and it would come up.
So I've got a story. I was 6 or 7 years old. I went to see a movie called The Hindenburg, and we snuck in to Cary
Really?
and saw, as we went in, it was the big jump scare with the hand coming up out of the grave. It was the end of the movie.
Oh, yeah.
And I had bad dreams about the hand coming.
That is her.
That's her hand?
That's, yeah. They said, you know, you don't have to do it, and she wanted to do it. So Jack, who's my uncle, had built a little set, like a little box for her to be in when they had these rocks and stuff, and yeah.
Taxi Driver.
Taxi Driver.
Lots of crazy things happen in this movie.
Yes, they do.
He creates this concealed sleeve gun that he has it rigged on a spring where he can do a motion, the gun ends up in his hand. And this is kind of neat because you actually get to see the process of him building it on camera, which, you know, you don't always get to see. Wild Wild West is a television show. The main guy in that had one of these. It's such a cool, iconic part of this movie and one of the best movies of the decade.
With the Wild Wild West, that one came from a prop house, Stembridge. They've long been out of business. But what makes this so iconic is you see him build the prop on camera, which is also very difficult for a prop person because you're having to match his cuts and everything. When someone thought of the sleeve gun, they don't think of Wild Wild West.
Yeah, I mean, this is the one you think about.
Yeah, you think sleeve gun, you think Taxi Driver.
Yeah. You know, it was a real thing, though. It was invented World War II by Hugh Reeves. The scene with him, the Are You Talking to Me, famously is all improv. As far as those lines, you know. I think in the script it had, you know, Travis looks in the mirror and talks to himself.
Right.
You talking to me? You talking to me?
You talking to me? I'm the only one here.
Well, I'm the only one here. Huh? Okay.
Last, but certainly not least, is an iconic prop that's so iconic, it is in the title of the movie, which is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. 1974, Tobe Hooper, Leatherface. Here we see him doing the chainsaw dance that Gunnar Hansen, the actor, improvised. It's the very ending of the film.
And when you're a prop master, you should always beware of a movie where the prop is in the title.
This was like an independently made movie that they shot in Central Texas, around Austin. This was a chainsaw that one of the investors of the movie had in his garage.
That's a Poulan, isn't it?
It's some conflicting information. Some people say it's Poulan 306A. Some people say it's a Poulan 245A. And I think the 245 is listed more commonly. Originally it was green, but they painted it yellow and then they just covered the logo with some electrical tape.
And they only had one, right?
They had one.
One is none.
What we commonly say on the prop crew is one is none, two is one, and you should have a third just for fun.
What they would do is whenever they were using it to make it safe, they would put a chain on it that had no teeth, that they were filed down, and they would take the clutch out of it so that it would spin more freely, smoke, make that real loud revving sound, which is kind of iconic, the sound itself. And then the scenes where it had to actually cut stuff, they would put the chain back on and put the clutch back in. And there is a scene where Leatherface, towards the end, he falls and the chainsaw goes onto his leg. They put a metal plate on the actor's leg, a piece of meat and fake blood all over it, and then the fabric or jeans. And they did the real saw.
Oh no.
It heated the metal up from friction so much that it burned his leg.
Ow.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Like there's a picture right before they're gonna do it.
Oh, wow.
See, he's holding it.
God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Tobe Hooper with the, I don't know why he's got the bullhorn.
Looks like the whole crew's right there.
I mean, that is the whole crew. It hurts.
You'll be fine.
Yeah. Action.
We're going to talk about iconic props from the 1980s.
Gentlemen, we're history.
I'm Scott. Here's Mark, Poppy, and Matt in the back. A lot of these movies I saw at the theater, so I'm excited about this one.
Me too. These are like very transformative film experiences from my childhood. Poppy, you were born in the 80s, right?
Sure was. 85.
Scott, you were... Never mind.
There are so many iconic props from the 1980s, there's no way we're going to be able to cover them all in one video.
Yeah, we're going to do one-off episodes in the future of certain films from certain decades that have a lot of iconic props. So if you're not seeing something you want to see, it's going to happen in the futures.
All right, first up is The Natural, starring Robert Redford.
Ooh.
And co-starring Wilford Brimley.
So if we're doing The Natural, I have a feeling it's a baseball bat.
Normally you would turn these on the lathe, but Robert Redford's character as a child makes a baseball bat by hand. He wood burns Wonder Boy and a lightning bolt.
And I know that the bat in the story, he makes it from a piece of a tree that was struck by lightning.
Hence the lightning bolt. Barry Bettig was the prop master of The Natural, and he had literally hundreds of bats. He found a factory in New York that would just sell him a ton of blanks. For the making of the bat, he went the old school route and where they did the shaving it off. Well, the prop master had to take a lot of swings at it, but he finally got it. So he started out with just a bunch of the blanks, the pieces of wood. So they had 3 different stages of looks.
Let me see that bat.
As far as for the actual Wonder Boy bat that he uses in the games, they had to have many multiples. The close-ups of the one that they were making was not turned on a lathe, but I guarantee you the hero one was.
I wanted it to be a very special bat.
Prop Master states that baseball bats in their time period that the film was set in, they were the same as regulation today. So it was easy for him to have them made.
Yeah.
It was like pre-1901, they were larger, but now they've been the same for over 100 years. Producer Mark Johnson donated the Wonder Boy bat, the Savoy Special, along with a couple of other items to the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Oh, that's cool.
And that's where it is today, if you want to see it.
We've got Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
The stars at night are big and bright.
Deep in the heart of Texas. Guess what the prop is?
Scooter.
Mark wins. It's the bike. So it's a Schwinn DX. They got all the bikes from a place called Pedal Pusher in Newport Beach. So they got all 14 bikes.
From one place.
Mm-hmm. None of them came fully assembled. They never had like one double. So it was always matching, but based on their budget.
That's weird.
Yeah, it's strange. But we've been down that road before. And they had to pick and choose, like they had to build them on the day with all the accoutrement that go with it.
I mean, it's so specific. There's so many little bells and whistles
So
on
many.
it.
Because he shoots the water, he shoots smoke, he flies.
Yeah, this was a situation where the props team, who would be in charge of the bike, would have been working really closely with special effects, with stunts. There's a big mistake there.
And surely the DP knew, oh, I'm seeing it being fed at the bottom.
Films are shot with, there's the safe area for TV, but there's also the safe area for theatrical release.
James Brolin played Pee-wee.
Yeah, PW.
Which is the best casting.
Yeah.
He's popular.
Time Bandits, directed by Terry Gilliam, 1982?
Produced by George Harrison.
My dog's name is George Harrison. One of my dogs' name is George Harrison.
The prop is the Supreme Being's map, which of course the Time Bandits have stolen, and they use it to travel through time, finding these time holes on the map, sending them through various parts of history, where they rob and steal from people. And apparently they only made 3.
I was going to ask.
Which is crazy. One they used for rehearsals. There was one they used on camera. And then there was one they kept as backup that was left pristine. Like it was never aged. Terry Gilliam, he hired a graphic designer. He gave him a few books as reference that had like astrological charts and old maps of cities from the 1700s. And it's on a canvas and it was screen printed and it was very detailed.
The fact that it was printed on canvas, that's why they were able to get away with only 3, because it was extremely durable, I'm sure. It had to be.
And then once it was screen printed, it was that main blue. He went back in and he put the white lines on it to create kind of grids in the map. And then he kind of painted some like faint galaxies in the background, astrological symbols using like royal colors. He said golds and purples and different kinds of blues.
So you're saying the third map remained pristine.
Yeah.
So they went through the whole movie with just 2 maps.
And really one, because one was for rehearsals.
It gets held and touched by like at least 10 different actors. That's amazing. Clash of the Titans 1981. I saw this in the theaters when I was 11. It's directed by Ray Harryhausen, who's known for doing a lot of stop motion.
He's the king of stop motion.
There's this mechanical owl named Bubo, which means owl, by the way. It's a Latin. It's a Latin term. It was a full mechanical version that they had for interacting with humans, and there's a smaller version that they would use for mainly for flying. Ray Harryhausen designed it. I'm not sure who made it, but I did read something from one of the stop motion assistants who said that there was the one that they're holding. It's about 13 inches high. So as you see, there are lights. The one that Burgess Meredith is holding, there's lights that go on.
Scott, can you talk to me about he's got like a crutch and a bandage?
There is a crutch. He's got a cast on. I never noticed that. That is a little mini crutch and a cast on his leg.
I'll allow it.
Ray Harryhausen passed away in 2013. There is a Ray Harryhausen Foundation where they have all of the stuff cataloged. They lend a lot of the items to museums and their traveling exhibits. Ray Harryhausen never threw anything away. So all of his models, going back to the early Sinbad movies, he had all these garages. And he lost Bubo. One of his photographer friends said, I'm going to go through everything. We're going to find this. So after 27 years, they found it in the far back corner in a wooden crate marked London. And it was wrapped in a white sheet in pristine condition.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite movies. This is one movie I've actually seen. The Telephone Booth from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
What's the 411 on this movie?
I don't know how many people haven't seen this movie, but it's about 2 dim-witted guys in San Dimas, California that travel through time and pick out various people from history to help them do a history report. In such, they save the world by making very excellent music. So our younger viewers may not know, but this is how you would call people back in the day. You'd throw a quarter in and you can make a phone call.
Was there just one phone booth?
There had to be different phone booths, basically, because there's different portions of the movie where they have stuffed 12 people in it, and it's laying long ways, and everyone's standing outside the door.
Oh, right
as
there.
you can see here. So they have different versions of it, but they didn't want them to get too large. So I couldn't find a count on how many they actually made.
You can see how giant it
but
is.
But yeah,
there.
you can see that there's definitely had to be different. And they had to have different versions for the antennas, because different portions of the antenna's broken, it's fixed.
Just an umbrella.
Well, my guess is that they started out with an existing phone booth. Right. And then they had a fabricator match it and replicate it, and then of course they made the larger version for when it has to basically be a boat.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure they made it out of all aluminum, so it was much lighter weight.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure some of that's plexi and not glass.
You can get a replica of these for around $9,000.
Yeah, you can also find toy versions. I'm just going to take it down a little bit. We're going to get a little romantic. Say anything. The Boombox.
Hold on, that's a Toshiba RTS X1.
What? So, John Cusack, he's holding the boombox above his head. He's playing Peter Gabriel's In Your Eyes. He's trying to woo Diane Court back to him. She has left him by this point in the film. As far as the boombox goes, it's not that interesting of a story. So the prop master of this movie, Barry Bettig, basically said that, you know, he had gathered a lot of things, like when you're doing a film, you gather a bunch of stuff that you need for the show, and then you do a show and tell for the director. So he just had a handful of boomboxes, and Cameron Crowe just said, that one.
I believe he said he rented it from a prop house, right?
Yeah, I think it's a rental.
It was a rental from a prop house, and it just had to go back to the prop house at the end, and who knows what happened to it.
Yeah, and this scene is an example of how when you're making a film or a show, you don't know necessarily what's going to become iconic. And the thing about this scene is it's so iconic, it has been parodied at least 13 times. Most famously was parodied in Deadpool 2.
It speaks volumes for how iconic that boombox is.
It's a twofer, guys. It's another boombox. Do the Right Thing, Radio Raheem. It's
a JS1 Jumbo.
It's a Pro Max Super Jumbo.
It's a JS1 Pro Max Super Jumbo.
Yes. And Do the Right Thing, Radio Raheem is always holding and carrying this giant boombox, blasting Public Enemy.
Speaking of Public Enemy, if you look at the sides of it, they've got they glued pieces of the Public Enemy album.
You know, this was a trend in the 80s where people would walk around with the boomboxes on their shoulders, or they would just carry them around. You know, the prop master, basically his brief was just find the biggest, coolest one you can. And that's what he came up with. And it's iconic. I mean, it's got lights, it's huge. And then at the end, Sal crushes, but even breaking one took for a while, apparently, because these things were so robust. That would be cool to have. And the real one, ironically, Spike Lee, he gave to the film critic Gene Siskel of Siskel and Ebert, who I guess was a big fan of this movie. And he autographed the back of it to Gene, fight the power, because, you know, Gene Siskel really has to fight the power. And then when he died, the state basically handed it over to Smithsonian, which it still is there today. You can go see it. Two iconic boomboxes.
This is the Tom Hanks film directed by Penny Marshall. It's called Big. So you have the Zoltar Speaks machine. A lot of people just say the Zoltar machine, but no, it's Zoltar Speaks. The prop master, James Mazzola, had a local amusement company build it. So it has that good kind of turn of the century feel, timeless look to it. And it was totally puppeteered by the prop master. And those really didn't work. You know, operating the lights, everything. The prop master had it built where he could fit inside it, and he operated the mouth. He said the hardest part was the chute that swings over, that you drop the coin into. From inside, he was turning the chute to where the coin would drop into the mouth. Now, I took a little bit of a deep dive trying to figure out where this Zoltar machine is, because there was only one. I found a YouTube video where this guy made a trek to Burbank and found out that it was at the Falcon Theater, which is now the Gary Marshall Theater. I called the Gary Marshall Theater yesterday and left a message, and at like 10 o'clock last night, the manager of the Gary Marshall Theater called me back and said, well, I hate to disappoint you, but when Gary Marshall died, I guess in 2016, not long after, I guess one of the family members or whatever, it got removed from the lobby. So it's back into the hands of the Marshall family estate.
Okay.
So
it's probably in one of their houses.
But up until a few years ago, you could just go to the Gary Marshall Theater in Burbank and see it in the lobby.
Guys, can we do a bit about a movie that made a random Australian dude really famous for a bit?
Yeah, I got you. Crocodile Dundee.
Aye, perfect.
And our iconic prop is his knife, which is a Bowie-style knife.
I wonder if the director yelled "cut" or if that confused things.
John Bowring was the prop designer, maybe the armorer for this movie. And he was in charge of coming up with the weapons. And so he had a meeting about the knife. It was basically said, we just want something really big. He was getting his like next to no direction. So he's like, let me build something and I'll show it to you and you tell me.
Very specific. Bigger.
Big knife, yeah. He fabricated an aluminum version. You know, it's just easier, it's lighter. If they're not having to interact with things, you know, you can dull it and it's very safe to use, and brought it and showed it to them. And they said, this is perfect. So he's like, no changes, like no changes. Paul Hogan, he went to John and said, when's my stainless steel knife coming? He said, well, you're not cutting anything in the movie, we don't think it's necessarily. He said, well, there's a scene, and he described the scene to him. He said, well, I haven't read that. And he said, well, I haven't written it yet. And start making the knife. So they had stainless steel ones also made.
He waves it in front of the Michael Jackson guy, and his jacket just shreds somehow.
Nicely done, Poppy. Anyway, you slice it, it's just a knife.
Last but not least, it's just a little movie called Short Circuit. So they're like attack robots. They've got like lasers and, you know, military grade parts. And one of them gets struck by lightning and comes alive, becomes a sentient being.
I like this opening.
Yes, the opening is pretty cool because the opening credits, you see them building this thing that was designed by Sid Mead, who's a famous futurist who worked with Tron, Aliens, Blade Runner, Star Trek. And then this robotics prop puppeteer guy named Eric Allum. They kind of designed it together, and then Eric Allum was the guy on set. And the thing about the robots is, other than a few capabilities, it was almost all puppeteering. And each one would take, like Johnny Five would take a few people to do, because they were doing different things. The eyebrows, the eyes, all those things. The eyebrows, that was a thing that just right before they started shooting, and they were thinking about the eyebrows on cameras. So they put those eyebrows as eyebrows, and it really saved them because it basically creates the emotion.
I can't help but wonder if this was inspiration for WALL-E.
There was an article from not too long ago that was talking about how surprisingly realistic these robots are in terms of the way they were designed. They move around on tracks like a tank. They have 3 fingered hands, camera/lenses for eyes. So basically, this mirrors a lot of robots that were made at the time and later even, other than the fact that it is the second prop on the list that was struck by lightning in the film.
If you include the telephone booth, that's powered by lightning-ish.
Oh, it's struck by lightning. There's 3 of them. Well, that was Tubular. That's it for iconic props of the 80s. We swung for the fences in a timely fashion, struck lightning not once, not twice, 3 times, but only 2 booms. No matter how you slice it, it was big.
It's like riding a bike.
We're naturals.
I'm Scott Prop and Roll. I got Mark, Poppy, and we're going to talk about iconic props from the 1990s.
The 70s and the 90s, like the 2 greatest decades of filmmaking, in my opinion. Some people say the 90s were the second 70s. So you might notice that we're in a different space. Look, we have a nice sign, and isn't it fun? Whether you know or not, we're in Texas, and we usually shoot in a warehouse that has no air conditioning, so it's a little warm. So we've moved into an air-conditioned space. You know, the 90s was another very formative decade for me in terms of these films. I mean, fantastic movies. It's kind of where the independent film scene really got going with people like Quentin Tarantino and Steven Soderbergh and Robert Rodriguez.
I've seen Groundhog Day.
You have?
I have.
Good. Bill Murray, Andy McDowell, Chris Elliott.
Steven Tobolowsky, I think it might be his literal first film, is Michael Shannon.
And then, of course, the Groundhog.
Yes.
The iconic prop, which you see over and over and over and over again in this movie, is the clock. And it was actually a Panasonic RC6025. They actually had a clock rigged to go from 5:59 to 6, and that's all it did, was 5:59 to 6. So she quickly jump in, hit a button, and it would reset for the next take. So they had to hunt around from to flea markets, to yard sales, thrift stores, and at the time the RC 6025 Panasonic was a very common flip clock. But if you try to look on eBay now, good luck. I've been hunting one down. I couldn't find one. So if anyone watching this has an RC6025 they want to get rid of, let me know.
Yeah, I'm wondering like what the actual, like when that clock came out on the market.
By this time, people were using the LED, I would guess mid 80s. They couldn't find it at retail outlets. They were hunting them down from, like I said, thrift stores, secondhand stores.
Like you can tell that one's a little different, and that's the one he's gonna crush, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
See, it looks different.
The placement of the light looked different.
Yeah.
Because you had two lights coming down, and I guarantee you that the electric department got in there and they, you know, placed bulbs.
Yeah, because he was gonna crush it. Because you can tell the whole front of it is darker.
I recently found out that Harold Ramis is a practicing Buddhist. And apparently to reach enlightenment, it takes 10,000 years. So in his mind, it was that Bill Murray spent 10,000 years, which that'd drive you crazy. Yeah, that was a little too staged, I think. Look at how it lands on the floor.
Down there.
It's all intricately placed.
They're not destroying the clock. They're throwing in the foam, there's a pillow.
Right, and they're just going to throw up some pieces.
Got, yeah, a handful of stuff.
This is prop master Amy McCarthy Wynn's first job to prop master. And
Wow.
I think she did an incredible job. She did have an interesting story. And the movie was released, it kind of pissed her off because on all the billboards, it's Bill Murray's face in the wrong clock.
Oh, right.
It was one of those old-fashioned bell clocks.
Yeah, that's like on the poster.
Yeah, well, she first saw it on the billboard, but I believe it's on the poster.
I'm sure it was marketing.
It was marketing department.
But obviously,
Somebody didn't talk to somebody.
yeah. Now did they build that?
Yeah, that was...
Yes. No way to do that, like with the practical one tight, as you take the cover off. They're probably like the size of football yard markers. You know?
Yeah.
Now, personally, I wasn't a big fan of the movie. It was just the way, the structure of it, it just was repetitive to me. And it seemed longer than it needed to be. So I'm serious, by the end of the movie, I was like, it's about time.
Now that I know that that was just a bit in service of your joke, I'm okay with it. Because if you actually didn't like Groundhog Day, I might have to leave. Because it's classic.
It's a classic.
So next up, we've got one of my favorite movies, Jurassic Park. So the iconic prop from Jurassic Park is, of course, the Barbasol can. Given to Dennis Nedry by Lewis Dodgson. Dodgson, we got Dodgson here. See, nobody cares. So in the film, the bottom unscrews, much like this one does, but inside there's a cryogenic chamber that can hold up to 15 dinosaur embryos and keeps them cold for 36 hours, up to 36 hours. So in the book, it's a Gillette can. I'm not sure where,
sense a parent company.
and it still works as regular shaving cream if it needs to be inspected.
So my guess is they switched it out with a real can of Barbasol. Because you notice there's a cut. Because this would be a pain to rig with both.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Couldn't find like how many they had of these. I mean, I'm sure they probably had a few. It's iconic, but it's not heavily featured. You know, you see it in this scene, you see it get buried in mud, you see it when he's getting the embryos.
He came really close to getting caught, and that was a close shave.
And they do have replicas. I found that they're called Paragon effects. They're like $300, $400.
There's levels.
It gets buried in mud, and the writer said that was supposed to be kind of like the gold dust in the wind and
Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
or you don't know whatever happens to it. But it's brought back in many other things like video games.
What is this?
I think this is the animated.
That Camp Cretaceous or whatever thing on that.
Yes.
So this is him finding it.
And then in the most recent film, Dodgson comes back and is now on display in his case. Now, I haven't seen Dominion, but everything I read about it with regards to this character and the Barbasol can makes it seem like it was very poorly set up, that you didn't recognize this character.
So are we to assume that someone found that within 36 hours? Because it was only good for, it would only keep it cold for 36 hours.
22 years later, so the embryos wouldn't be viable, but I guess it serves as an Easter egg for the audience. I did find at auction, there's a $25,000, you could bid $25,000 plus for one from the movie.
Now, I want to say my favorite prop from Jurassic Park is not the Barbasol can, it's the glass of water. when you hear and feel the footsteps of the T-Rex and the way the water moves in the glass of water.
Well, that water, I believe, is never touched. So technically, some water.
There is a scene.
I guarantee you Props had some involvement.
There is the scene with
the way they got they tried 1,000 different ways to get that right, like footstep ripple in the water, and they ended up using a guitar.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Wait. A guitar?
Guitar.
Or a guitar.
It's a guitar.
Our next prop is from a great movie called The Usual Suspects. Yeah.
It's one of my favorites. I love it.
It's so good. If you haven't seen Usual Suspects, do yourself a favor. So the prop is Agent Coulion's coffee mug, which of course has something written on the bottom. It's not that I just wrote that K. That's a K. So the whole framing device of the movie is a interrogation that Chaz Palminteri does of Kevin Spacey. And in the end of the movie, you basically see Kevin Spacey's been making it up. And you discover at the end, Agent Coulion is like amazed that this has happened. He drops his coffee mug. You see the bottom of the coffee mug and it says Kobayashi Porcelain, which was the name of the lawyer of the bad guy that Kevin Spacey kept saying, Kobayashi.
I am Mr. Kobayashi. I have been asked by my employer to bring a proposal.
Kevin Spacey's character gave up no name, so everything was off of printed material in there.
There's actually a shot early on where Palminteri's on the desk, Spacey's in a seat, and the shot is, you see the coffee mug as Palminteri's taking a drink, and you see Spacey looking directly at the bottom of the mug. So that's a little...
Right, but you don't make the connection till later.
No,
right.
Of course not. But when you go back, you're like,
yeah.
Ooh. So the reason I think that the mug is so iconic, it's all visual. It's kind of as you, the audience member, realizes, and he's got his coffee, and he drops the mug like, oh my God, Kobayashi porcelain. And it's just like the cherry on the sundae. And there's no real Kobayashi porcelain. That's made up for the movie. I never found out for sure, but, you know, Kobayashi probably came from Christopher McQuarrie, the writer, being a Star Trek fan.
Data on Kobayashi Maroon.
Subject vessel is third-class neutronic fuel carrier.
They had a bunch of breakaways that they got, and they had to do it multiple times to get it right. But apparently the one in the shot is a real cup because of the edges you would see were different if it was breakaway. And it's just a stamp, and the prop master was apparently, he didn't know they were gonna get that tight, which, why didn't he see the monitor? But he was nervous that it looked too much like a stamp, although I think it looks fine.
Lost his grip on the situation. Because that was definitely not breakaway, because it doesn't break like breakaway. Breakaway ceramic has got like a wax mixture in it. It just breaks different.
I almost kind of feel like it was real.
It looks real to me because of the shine on it.
And especially that version that comes off the ground in such a big chunk.
Yeah.
Because breakaway isn't that strong usually. It's annoying on days like this because you're breakaway, so it's like you shoot it and cut. And then prop set dresser goes in. You got to pick up all the pieces. You got to sweep. You got to mop. You got to dry it. Then you shoot again. And you do it over and over.
You got to make sure that the floor doesn't look like you just cleaned.
Yeah, it's just like liquid. There's no sweetener because you can't make it sticky.
Well, that's the other question. We should talk about his coffee. I feel like most seasoned cops they're drinking black coffee. He's definitely got some cream. So I wonder if there's a way that cup could have maybe broken a more repetitive fashion since you have to do it so many times.
Well, you'd have to pre-score it. Or possibly do a magnetic reusable version. Maybe we'll try that in another video. All right, next up is Office Space, the red stapler.
Can you see my stapler? It's red.
So this was filmed here in Austin, Texas. My good friend Stan Gilbert, Stanford S. Gilbert, he made it. Now at the time, Swingline did not make red staplers. I think it was model 647. I might be wrong on that. Got one that Mike Judge liked the size and shape of, but then they ended up adding Bondo to it and painting it and then moving the swing line on a normal stapler. The swing line logo's on the top. They moved it to the side. Because of this film, the swing line company got over inundated with requests for red staplers because they didn't make one. It took them a few years before they finally made one, and when they did, they didn't really match. So for the 20th anniversary, they made this collector's edition that is modeled after one of the real ones. Now, the real staplers, there were like 8 of them that Stan made. Mike Judge ended up with 2, and as you know, the stapler got burned, so Stan had to torch one. So Mike Judge got a torched version and an untorched version. Stephen Root, who played Milton, signed this stapler, and as you see, it says, he wrote on it, "Have you seen my stapler?"
So Scott, would you say this is one of your prized possessions?
Well, I am quite attached to it. It's a staple item in my collection.
Oh, that joke was easy.
That Office Space and the character of Milton was all inspired by one of Mike Judge's very first animated shorts. Oh, there you go.
They even called it Office Space.
There you go.
You got nailed the glasses too, huh?
We're here. Let me just go ahead and get that from you. Thanks.
All right, so my next one is the putter from Happy Gilmore.
Whoa, here it comes.
Here it comes. Perry Blake was the co-production designer, and according to them, it was a complete fabrication. Here we have a regular putter. Adam Sandler's character was a hockey player that became a golfer because of his amazing ability to drive. So he was winning some tournaments early on, but wasn't very good and needed to learn how to putt to really challenge Shooter McGavin. Yeah.
Chris McDonald.
Chris McDonald.
I got to work with him on We Can Be Heroes.
He was. Was he the president?
Yeah. He learns how to putt using this hockey stick putter, end of a hockey stick here that, as you can tell, this one is curved, but it's flattened out like a putter. Adam Sandler is also always very involved in his movies, so he tried it out. Dennis Dugan, the director, they would work together and found the one they liked. I couldn't find a count on how many they made, but I'm sure they had a few of them, especially since they're fabricating them themselves.
I doubt it was made out of wood, but I could be wrong.
It could have been.
No, I think it was. The base of it, I think, was.
It was?
Probably because they figured it would be too heavy if you made it solid metal.
Yeah. Okay.
The big trick with making wood look like metal is the fact that it's really hard to replicate metal.
I mean, it's probably wood because wood's got more give, so it's going to break less.
Yeah, the resin would crack.
It's hard to tell whether or not it was a full fabrication job or if they would take pieces of like a pre-existing putter and added the hockey stick. It's certainly a cool thing, and yeah, it's certainly something that doesn't exist. It's why I grew up playing hockey, and I love Adam Sandler. So this was a big part of my childhood was this movie. In hockey, you tape your stick, and now they're so different. This definitely has wood with like a fiberglass wrapping, and then you put the puck tape on.
Yeah. Well, Carl Weathers makes it, right?
Yeah, he makes sure had it made for him.
Yeah.
But I mean, he has his hand, too, so it's like he probably knows some people that do stuff.
Next, we have Edward Scissorhands, and the Scissor Hands are our prop. This is a Tim Burton film from somewhere in the 90s, 91 or something. It's a fantastic movie. It's like a classic. Johnny Depp changed his career. Prior to this, he had been doing more like 21 Jump Street, and this movie really kind of showed him to be an actor. And the whole story is based off a drawing that Tim Burton did when he was a kid. He was an artist as a child, and he had drawn Edward. It weren't scissors. It was like long, like kind of blades or something for hands. He kind of worked with a writer who wrote it, and Caroline Thompson. Thinking about how they were going to do this, they approached the amazing Stan Winston, who did Jurassic Park. It was really Winston's idea, apparently, to incorporate literal scissors. So when Stan Winston was designing it, the idea was that each finger is its own kind of pair of scissors. So they're all kind of different, almost like each one's from a different pair. They are not made of metal. They were cast, then made out of resin, and then they were vacuum metallicized with aluminum to give the metal appearance. Obviously, they didn't want to put real sharp metal blades on his hands.
From a prop person standpoint, I'm imagining it was quite a job of whoever was having to like throw the clippings and the hair, the dog hair and the human hair that's flying around. They had to devise a system, but look at it. It's all pretty uniform in the way it's flipping up, you know?
Yeah.
That they just put loose hair on it and he just knocked it off
moving
on the dog.
Right. There was a real pair made, or maybe even two. There were insert pairs that were run by puppeteers that could actually cut things. And I mean, that's, just a special effects field day. I'm sure they were just little valves. The sheet was already cut, I'm sure. Some kind of layer of foam that he could poke, but if you do it like frame by frame, I bet the pokes don't even match quite where the water comes out of.
Yeah.
Stan Winston had two. And then either Johnny Depp or Tim Burton had one, and one was in a private collection, but they do come up for auction, it seems, from time to time, and they're generally been valued like $20,000 to start, I think. There's multiple scenes where he like scratches people and stuff. It's a pretty easy to see effect. They literally just put a little blood or something on it.
My guess is there was a representative from Stan Winston's studio that probably was in charge and no one touched things.
Yeah, sometimes because this thing was probably somewhat delicate, you're right, it was
maybe the prop department handled the stunt pair or the whatever the double was wearing.
The Edward robot, if you notice, is cutting celery, which I always thought was kind of weird. And then, you have Vincent Price. He plays the inventor that creates Edward. Apparently, besides making cookies, he also manufactures something to do with celery. Just not sure what.
So we got another Bill Murray movie here. This is the Big Earn bowling ball from the movie Kingpin. When they were scouting locations for the film, they went into a Pittsburgh bowling alley and found a pro shop. There was a single bowling ball made out of clear resin with a rose in the middle. And Peter was like, yeah, we got to get that. That's perfect for Big Earn. They only had one of them. And when they shot the sequence of him where he's supposed to hit 3 strikes in a row, he actually hit 3 strikes in a row. So when the crowd's screaming and hollering, it's because he just did an amazing thing. I mean, they just kept rolling with it. Being able to do what he did in that scene, it was obviously a striking success.
Spared no expense.
Hey man, stay in your lane. It has since stayed in a Boston bowling alley for like 30 years. And I'm not sure if the alley just decided, well, they just wanted to get the money from it, whatnot. It just went up for auction like in the last couple months. And it sold for $350,000.
It's amazing to me that they didn't get another one made.
Yeah, I agree.
That's uncommon. I mean,
I don't know,
but hey.
But from all accounts of what I've read, there was just one, which is why it sold for $350,000. Now, if you get online, you can find replicas. They're making replicas now that are around $125.
So did they just get lucky that it fit his hand?
Well, they probably drilled the holes out. I'm sure they.
Okay, so there's a modification.
Yeah. And most of those old bowling alleys, because I've worked some movies where we're in some old bowling alleys on the East Coast, and a lot of them have the drills in the back in the area where the pin resetters are.
And it reminds me of a movie that came out very close to this movie called Mystery Men, where Janine Garofalo plays a character that has a acrylic or clear bowling ball that's got a skull in it.
It's got a skull inside it.
Yeah. With Janine Garofalo's ball from Mystery Men and Bill Murray's ball, if they got them together, make a nice Guns N' Roses bowling extravaganza.
His joke was in the gutter.
How would Edward Scissorhands do with a bowling ball?
That would be challenging.
Go ahead, smile. It's funny.
So my last iconic prop of the 1990s is the board game from the movie Jumanji. The namesake of the film itself, crude replica here.
So is this like a mass market game that they came out with?
This is a newer version. I think it might have some audio. Oh, there it is.
Have you ever played this game, Timmy?
No, I haven't. We should play it later.
I wonder if you'd get bored.
So tell us all about it, Mr. Pops.
So Joe Johnston directed this. They made multiple of these games and boards. They had at least two of the hero games made, but they were very heavy. But those are mostly for the inserts, and those were all made out of wood. They molded a bunch of them that could be used to be carried around, so to be light on the weight, but those didn't open. And then they had multiple stunts were used in them, so they would, they used rubber ones for that. I think one of the hero ones had taken the back plate had been taken out, so the pieces would be magnetized for things like setting up the board game and how they move once you roll the dice. I actually haven't seen any of the newer ones.
Yeah, I don't
have. They're in the game, right?
They're in a video game.
Oh,
yeah.
But one thing you notice about those movies from the 90s is they incorporate the practical effects very well.
It was on that cusp of practical effects and computer-generated effects.
But if you're immersing yourself in the film, you don't necessarily
Yeah.
clue into all that, and it's done very, very well.
It is interesting. You go back to this stuff, and I love seeing the old practical stuff.
Pulling on them, they're stuck to the board.
Oh yeah, they just drilled them in, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, or
Yeah,
he's just acting.
Well, I'm sure they stuck him down
Yeah,
so
they
he
probably
could act better.
They probably did, because he's a kid. They probably just drilled him in. And I mean, this is based off a book, is it? Like a kid's book originally?
Yes.
Obviously there was a guide to do it, but I'm sure whoever got to design the game, that was a lot of fun. Sure, a little stressful too, but as long as you had enough prep time, that's kind of a fun gig to kind of like make the little figures and figure out how it all works. And Joe Johnston, who's been in our previous video, because he was a big part of Lucasfilm. He worked on all the Star Wars movies. Before he became a director, he was an effects guy. He did Honey, I Shrunk the Kids prior to this. And then he went on to do like the first Captain America and Jurassic Park 3, unfortunately.
Should we give him a pass on that one?
Well, I mean...
Alan.
Okay, so our next prop is something special to me. It's from Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, and it is the gold watch. I hid this uncomfortable Uncle Metal of my 2 years, and then I was released to my family, and now, little man, I give the watch to you. Christopher Walken, of course, doing the Gold Watch monologue from Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction is broken into 3 segments, and each one has a title, like a separate story. And the middle segment that features the Gold Watch is called The Gold Watch. So the story is that they needed it to look old, because obviously it's supposed to be, 80 some odd years old. And Jonathan Hodges, I believe, the property master, found something that he showed to Tarantino and he liked. And the interesting thing about it was that most of the time with watches, the way the bands attach, there's these little spring-loaded bars. That's something that, as prop people, we have to deal with a lot, changing out bands or watches breaking. Usually, as you can see, you have these 2 prongs and the bar would go between them. Well, in the watch that the property master found, I think in just like a pawn shop, there was actually like a bracket that was like soldered on. So it created these little bar things that were like, it was just attached. It's a very uncommon situation, kind of a one of a kind. And Tarantino liked it, so that's what they used. The band that they got for the present day sequences, I think it was a springy.
Yeah, the Speedle or Spidle is a very well known band brand.
There you go. So they found one of those, and apparently Bruce Willis at the time was a big watch guy, so he was kind of involved in that choice. They don't know for sure. They think Tarantino has it when these guys have talked about it.
You say Bruce was kind of a watch guy, which makes sense because I worked with Bruce. I went to his trailer with watches, and he was not impressed with anything I had.
Jared,
I had some nicer ones in the collection.
Watches are so rarely seen in close-up. You can buy affordable watches that look expensive, but that aren't. And if there was an insert and it was supposed to be a nice watch, we would get a nice watch. This is worth getting on YouTube and just searching for this monologue to watch Walken do this. It's like a 3.5, 4 minute monologue. Looks straight in the camera and does this monologue. He steals the movie in a lot of ways. Only scene he's in. So you should definitely check it out.
So we should watch it?
Yeah, you should watch it.
If you have the time.
Ah! Well, I think that went well. We weren't playing games. We didn't get creamed.
Yeah, that's putting it lightly.
This video is my cup of tea, but if you do any more puns, I'm going to clock you.
Come on, the puns are what hold it all together.
Really, you should watch this show.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button.
All right, let's split.
Yeah, cut there.
There.